Good morning. This is Richard Murray with a session of Parking Lot Theology. This is the first one I've had in a very long time. It's great to be back with y'all. I'm excited about it. And I want to talk to you today about something called divine accommodation. I posted a couple of weeks ago that I was excited about this concept. It's something that the early church fathers taught, and it really will help us understand and get past Old Testament roadblocks. You know, the passages that seem to talk about God requiring killing and sacrifices and violence and baby killing and rape commanding. Yes, there are passages in the Old Testament where God is quoted as commanding and causing rape of the enemies of Israel. And plague sending, and the Lord delighting to send marvelous plagues our way. Well, let me just tell you, there's no way that's correct. All right, Jesus taught us better. He showed us better. He illuminated us better. But yet we still remain, some people are still troubled, but why does the Old Testament say that? Well, because of divine accommodation. All right, this will help you work through a lot of these issues as to why the Old Testament at times it provides us an image clash with the New Testament. You don't see Jesus commanding and causing rape. You don't see Jesus making anyone sick by laying hands on them and saying, here, catch some disease. This will teach you humility. I'm marvelously happy to send you this plague. Of course, that's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And the fact that some people don't jump at that notion as being utterly ridiculous shows why we need divine accommodation to begin with. So let me tell you what it is. I like this quote by Henry Bergson where he says, the eye sees only what the mind and heart is prepared to comprehend. All right. So we're dealing with an all-omniscient, all-powerful God full of nothing but love and light. We can't possibly, at our stage of development, understand everything in a moment. All right. So God comes down and he meets us where we're at. And where we're at, unfortunately, a lot of the time, is that we have wrath in our hearts. We have hatred for our enemies in our hearts. We have darkness in our hearts. We have an eye for an eye mentality in our hearts. And especially the ancient world, as barbaric as it could be on occasion, and people not having rights, and vulnerable individuals not having rights, like children and women, and that sort of thing. They were obviously victimized by this barbaric world. And I'm not saying there wasn't any protection, but it's certainly one of the fruits of civilization as we've grown is that vulnerable individuals are protected more. So it's not perfect, and some societies don't do that. But generally speaking, the orphans and the widows and all that, which, the New Testament says it's undefiled religion is taking care of the vulnerable individuals, people who are put away circumstantially and ostracized and have no resources. But at any rate, why does the New Testament paint God as love only, light only, turn the other cheek only? Whereas the Old Testament paints God as wrath, darkness, eye for an eye, revenge. All right. Why does this image clash? All right. So divine accommodation, let me read you a definition. I wrote this. This is my own definition because I expanded a little bit more than it's traditionally used. But divine accommodation entails God maneuvering around our current level of receptivity and maturity by spiritually stooping to that level, linguistically, intellectually, emotionally, theologically, and ontologically. That's a lot of lees. But it's basically saying that God takes baby steps with us. Jesus at one point told the disciples, you can't bear more. I have so much more to tell you, but you couldn't bear it. So we can only bear certain things at the level where we're at, or we would be totally completely frustrated, completely overwhelmed, and just run away. God knows that, and he maneuvers around that. He also factors in all our poor perceptions and disabling mindsets, which we get from various indoctrinations, like religious indoctrination, society indoctrination, superstitious indoctrination, nationalistic indoctrination, all these cultural conditioning that we've been put under. God meets us where we're at to take us to the next connect the dot. Baby steps, connecting the dots. That's what the Lord is about. He can't come and give us the laundry list of, well, here's 200 things you're thinking wrong right now. We need it, none of that's correct and none of that's right. God doesn't do that. He lets you even think things wrong about him because you're not ready to deal with him yet because of the wrath in your own heart. You can't conceive that it's a God that wouldn't let you strike back at the enemy. 7 times 70 revenge and that sort of thing. You know what I liken it to? I liken it to, I call this the Dada example. when a child is born and a child obviously gets up to be an infant stage, the first thing he knows is his mother, obviously, the mother's breast, and the mother, that's what the mother, but he can't differentiate other people, and then, as the child gets to be an infant, then the child starts differentiating it. And I've had 7 kids, and I know that, a lot of times, they would call all men dada, in the beginning, because they didn't know better. Dada, mama was first, there was just mama, then there was dada. And then they were able, as they grew developmentally, to start to learn other names, brother, whatever nickname for brother, and sister, and that sort of thing. So it's a process of differentiation. The Old Testament saints had an undifferentiated view of God, and I've often called that the glop. And the glop holds God both good and evil, responsible for good and evil, both wrath and love. But Jesus comes in the New Testament and pulls apart the glop and says, no, that needs more definition. You were infants. And even John Calvin said the Old Testament saints were infants. Paul said it in Galatians. They needed a tutor. They were infants. They didn't understand because of their cultural conditioning. And because Jesus hadn't been incarnated at that point, and they didn't know what we know. But even we continue to need it. So an example of accommodation would be, in the Old Testament, they weren't going to do away with blood sacrifices because of all the violence and the blood and the appeasement issues that ancient societies had, but they did away with idols. They called that idolatry. Then in the New Testament, they do away with sacrifices. All right, so baby steps. All right, so the point in all this being that even though God was misrepresented in the Old Testament, it's because they didn't have the vocabulary yet to differentiate the satanic energies versus the Abba's energies. And when I say satanic energies, I'm not getting into whether Satan is an actual person or angel or anything like that. I'm just getting into the satanic energies that the Bible talks about, the wrath, the violence, and all that. So anyhow, I've got a lot more to say about this, and I'm already spending more time than I thought that I would on it. But I hope this blesses you, and I will give you some good examples as we go on with this about how we apply this, how we not let Old Testament roadblocks, we kick through the roadblocks because Jesus is on the other side of that roadblock. And just remember this, when Jesus comes to us, when the Lord comes to us, first he wants his foot in the door, then he wants his ankle in the door, then he wants his shin in the door, then his knee, then his hip, then his arms, then his chest, then his head. He's working to open us up to him gradually and progressively. And because he has so much overwhelming light and goodness in him, it's a lifetime of lifetimes, an eternity of lifetimes for us to soak it all in. So anyhow, but we enjoyed the journey and accommodation. The church fathers believed it, Origen and Gregory of Nazianzus was big on that, and we'll talk more about that next time. God bless y'all. Good to be back with you.